Okay, today is about factoring, and I'm starting the kids off with just a really simple factor of this problem. Sometimes it's hard for people though, just because it doesn't have two parentheses, and that's what people are used to. I bet you've got this. You're looking confident. Tell me what you got.
I factored out 2x.
All right. Did you take out a 2x? All right, and then tell me what you had next.
I had x
plus 1. All right. Now, let's see if that works. Actually multiply it back out for me. So we go 2x times the x makes 2x squared. Okay, and then the 2x times the 1 makes, it doesn't work. All right, thank you. But you're one of those people that I was just describing where the first few might be a little rough, and it's okay. You'll be back to your straight A form soon. What do you say?
x parentheses 2x plus 1.
Now I think that's right, but I'm going to double check you. How can I make sure? Just multiply it back out. Part of the beauty of factoring, you can always know you're right. All you have to do is multiply the thing back out again and see if it comes out the way it's supposed to. X times the 2x, 2x squared. X times the 1, x, yay. And the only other thing you have to watch out for is, can I factor it further? Because see, some of the problems we're going to have today are going to, you get down to something complicated like this. And you've got it factored all the way down to that, and you're like, oh, phew, that took a lot of work, but you're not even done. Because do you get part of this can factor further? That x squared minus 9 part there. What does that factor to? X plus 3 and x minus 3. All right, good. Okay, so another kind of factoring is where there's something in everything. Something comes out of everything first. It's called the GCF, greatest common factor. If you don't notice that, you can still factor it the other way, but you're very likely to forget that there's a GCF in there. So if you can catch it at the beginning, it's the best way. Mr. V, you got this one? What comes out of everything? Okay, what'd you get then, after the 2 comes out? Perfect. How many of you noticed that can factor again? Awesome. Ms. SP, what did you get it factored to next? Very nice. Raise your hand if you had that one right. Okay, good. Now, how could I know for sure she was right? I just did a quick outside, inside, and it made outside and inside made 2x and 1x makes 3x. If you check the outside and the inside and it makes the middle, it's almost 100% that it's right. Yes, technically, there are a few weird cases where the outside and inside make the middle, but then you didn't actually get 2 numbers that made this. But basically, I'm saying outside and inside is the best thing to check. All right, one more. Let's say I had 5x squared minus 25. Please try to factor that one. Now, some of you are probably thinking, I must be doing it wrong because I don't get how I'm going to make this thing work. It's one of those kind where all that can factor out is something. What can factor out of both parts? 5. And you'll have an x squared minus 5 left, and that's it. And you can't factor that any further. Okay. You get how 5 comes out of this? I'm dividing by 5, and I get x squared. And I divide this by 5, and I get 25 divided by 5 is 5. Okay, now I think you're ready for the last kind that I need you to be ready to factor. We did this already. That one factors easily into x plus 4 and what? X minus 4. But what if I change it to that? It still factors. You just have to use imaginaries. Would you agree x and x is like a lock? That's pretty much got to be there. Okay. So then all it boils down to is what's the other parts? And do you get that on this kind where there's 2 pieces and we end up with 2 parentheses that we've always had a plus and a minus? and we always will. Okay. Then what's left? Yes, sir. For I. Very good. The reason you have to throw the I on there is because if I just leave it the way it is, the outside and the inside are going to cancel, which is all good. But the less multiply to negative 16. Do you get how I want the negative 16 to turn back to positive? And then if I throw in an I and an I, it'll make an I squared. Do you remember that I squared is equal to negative 1? All right, so that's why we got to throw in an extra I. So bottom line is, if it's a plus here, you can still factor it. You just have to throw in I's. I'll give you another one like that. X squared plus 81. It factors. But you have to use I's. Okay, so did you get 2 parentheses, x and x? Raise your hand if you started that way. Good. Then did you have a plus and a minus? Raise your hand if you had that. Okay, and the last part is a 9 and a 9, and there we go. Raise your hand if you had that right. Oh, good. Nobody suckered into that one. So what is the final right answer? What'd you get?
X plus 9I.
Yes. Now, let me explain why you care. Because a typical test question will say that equals 0. Why would we have f of x, which is what this starts as, turn into a 0? Because the y, which is what f of x is, turns into 0 when you have the what's? The x-intercepts. The x-intercepts are where y is 0. That's why we set the thing equal to 0. That's why we care about factoring this, because if this thing equals 0, then I now have my answers. If x is negative 9I, do you get how it'll cancel that out and make it equal 0? And if x is positive 9I, it'll cancel out that one and it'll make it equal 0. So my answers are 9I and negative 9I. Those are my roots, my zeros. The one thing they are is they're not x-intercepts because they're imaginary. Remember how imaginaries, you can't actually see them in the graph? They're kind of like leprechauns. You know they're there, but you can't see them. All right. So let's get to the actual problems. Here's a gray one. It's the first slide that's got an actual math problem on it that I think you're ready for it now. Got your brain warmed up on factoring. This one seems complicated because it's got this to the 4th power, but if you just treat it like any other one and figure out what has to go here and what has to go there, it's not that bad. What has to go in those first 2 slots? X and x will not make x to the 4th. X squared and x squared, yes. And then you just got to figure out what goes in the last spots. Well, they have to multiply to negative 8. Well, there's lots of options, Mr. Server, that multiply to negative 8. They need to multiply to negative 8, and they need to add to 2. What multiplies to negative 8 and also adds to 2? Mr. R, do you have it? Positive 4 and negative 2. Raise your hand if you had the same thing. Okay, awesome. Now, this one is, how can I tell for sure if I'm done? You factor it out. You FOIL it out, sorry. It's x makes x to the 4th. Good, check mark. Outside, negative 2x squared. Inside, positive 4x squared. Adds up to positive 2x squared. Check mark. Last one, makes negative 8. It worked. Yay. Okay. But what is this thing about solutions? That means I actually have to finish the deal. And I actually have to get the answers. So I need both parts of this to factor so that I can get my final answers. Because whatever makes this part 0, that's one of the answers. Whatever makes this part 0, that's one of the answers, etc. All right, I just taught you, just reminded you how to factor these complicated ones. This x squared plus 4 would factor into x and what? Say it. Plus 2i and minus 2i. Good. But this next one is the challenge monkey. X and x, that part's easy. Who can pull this off? Yes, sir. You are so right. Do you get how we always use a plus and a minus? So there was no like genius there. But square root of 2 times the square root of 2 makes 2, doesn't it? Just like the 2i and the 2i makes a 4, and the reason it has to be i's is because we need that I squared in there, which equals -1, to bring this negative back to being a positive. Whew, that's intense stuff. All right, so we got it all factored. So let me get the final answers. What would make this parentheses equal 0? If I stuck in what? -2i. What would make this parentheses equal 0? If I stuck in a positive 2i. What would make this parentheses equal 0? If I stuck in a -√2. And then last one, if I put in a positive √2. There's my 4 answers. Take a wild guess how you could have told ahead of time that there was going to be 4 answers. Power of 4. Remember how we had power of 2's like this for a long time? You kept getting 2 answers? Now, if you have power of 4, you're going to get 4 answers. If you have power of 6, take a guess. 6 answers, yep. Crazy, but true. So you're going to be the most powerful factoring machine that you've ever been. In fact, this class does harder factoring than they have in AP BC calculus, which is the highest calculus that we offer right now. So this is hardcore factoring. All right. What's the next one? Do you see anything different about this one? Something can come out of all of them. And if you notice that ahead of time, your life is so much easier. If you can get something reduced off of everything, it's so much easier. So get that 2 out to the front. And then see what you have left. I want you to compare it with the person that I pair you with. My mic was off for a while there. I hope you were able to follow that. I'm pausing for now while you give this part C a shot. Okay, did you notice that an X comes out at the very beginning? How many of you noticed that? Raise your hand if you did. Okay, good. I thought more people would be fooled than that. X squared plus 6x plus 9. Then, can I just stop right there? No, I got to factor it further. And then I have x plus 3 and x plus 3. Raise your hand if you think that's the right answer. It is the right answer. Okay, good job. So what are the actual solutions to it then? Does this one matter? Yes. Yes, otherwise you'll only have 2 answers. Why would that be a problem if you only had 3 and -3? Because there's supposed to be 3 answers. Remember that x at the top? Uh-oh, I did something wrong. Okay, oh, it's supposed to both be -3. My bad. My point was, though, that if I only had those 2 answers, I'd only have 2 answers, and there's supposed to be 3 answers. So that one needs an answer, too. It could have its own little parenthesis, couldn't it? And couldn't I say plus 0 in there? And that might help you see that the answer is 0 for that one. 0 for that one, -3, and -3. If you can double check, I know there's a lot of things to check on these, but double check that if you say there's 3 answers, it better say to the third. You know what I mean? If they say to the 5th power and you only give 4 answers, you did something wrong. You're supposed to be 5 answers. That's another way to kind of check yourself before you wreck yourself. All right. This green one, I think we're going to pass on. We're going to go directly to the 4-part kind because it reminds me of Abraham Lincoln. Why on earth would that remind me of Abraham Lincoln? Because Abraham Lincoln said, "A house divided against itself cannot stand." He was talking about the United States and how we could not be divided into North United States and South United States. We had to be one nation, and we were going to go to war over it, and eventually we came out as one nation. Had a pretty bloody, terrible Civil War, lost more people in the Civil War than any war since then, even more than in World War II or World War I. So if you divide and conquer, it's another strategy. It's a good war strategy. I said we lost. We meaning we in the United States lost more people in the Civil War than any other war. But you're right. I'd have saying more lives were lost there than any place else on the planet, just the United States. Okay, back to this. Divide and conquer. I'm dividing this into 2 parts, and I'm forgetting about that part. What if I just said factor the first part? Wouldn't that be pretty easy? Factor the first part. Just factor the first part. One little step at a time. Also reminds me of another favorite saying. How do you eat an elephant? You don't and you shouldn't. They're probably good answers. But the correct answer is 1 bite at a time. If you just take one little piece of this at a time, it's really not that hard. Little piece of elephant ear right now, you know, just kind of tough it down. Eventually, over your lifetime, you could eat an elephant. No big deal. All right, so this can be factored. Mr. W, what do you got?
I had x squared plus 3.
Awesome. Okay. Now, can I go further? Yeah, I can go factor the other part. So I'm going to ignore this for now and try to focus in on this green area here. Well, that's really easy. Factor that part for me. What do you say, Mr. R? Mr. RH? Yeah. Now, the green part and the blue part have something in common. What do they both have in them that I can factor out? X plus 3 can be factored out now. And then when I do factoring, really what I'm doing is dividing by that thing. So I'm dividing by x plus 3, dividing by x plus 3. And do you get how that makes that cancel and that cancel? And my final answer is what's in the parentheses that's left is x squared plus 2. Now I know that's kind of mind-blowing, but really it's not super complicated. They both had an x plus 3 in them, so the x in front. And what's left over? X squared plus 2. If my life depended on it, I didn't do this in the other class, but if my life depended on it, do you get I could check this thing by first outside, inside, lasting it and make sure that it's actually right? I will take a second and do that right now just to make sure I didn't screw this up. That times that makes x to the third. Cool. And then outside, what's that make? 2x. Whew, that's right there. And inside, 3x squared. Oh, that's right here. And the lasts make the 6. Yay, it worked. What? Oh, okay. Good question. So I've got it factored, but I haven't got the solutions yet. If I need the solutions, which it does say, find all the solutions, you are correct. I can't stop here. But that was called factoring by divide and conquer is my favorite way of saying it. Another way to say it that's a little less violent is factor by grouping. You group the front and you group the back, and then you factor the groups. Okay, but it is a good war strategy. All right, so if this thing equals 0, do you get that x equals -3 as one of my answers? But what's the answer for this part? It would be nice if it was factored further. So I will accept that as factored all the way. But if you need your solutions, I recommend you factor it one more time. Can you do it? X and plus and minus are all no-brainers. What's the last part? Square root of 2. And what else needs to be there? It's not just square root of 2. Why can't this work by itself? Because it would come out to a -2. And it's supposed to come out to +2. So we need to throw in an I in both spots. Final answer. -3 for this part. This part, -I√2. This part, +I√2. 1, 2, 3 answers. There's supposed to be 3 answers. All is good in the world. In this particular spot, related to math. Okay. That was divide and conquer. Try it again all by yourself. I'm going to pause for a moment while you try this one. Okay, so I'm getting a student to answer this one. He said x squared comes out first, and you get x. Keep going. Yep. And then the part underneath the red had a little trick to it. What did you notice there? A negative. What? Negative what? And then if you do that, you'll have a what left over? And that happens to work out perfectly because now they both have an x plus 3. If you had an x minus 3 and an x plus 3, you could probably figure you did something wrong because they're supposed to match. How do I know he did that right? Because if I FOIL it back out, this times this and this times that, actually it's just distributing it back out. It proves that it works. Okay, final answer. X plus 3's come to the front. Whatever's left over, which is the x squared and the -8, and that's factored all the way except if I need the solutions. Do I need the solutions? Yes, I do. So I need to finish this one last step and say equals 0 and then factor this part right here. Can you do it? And please be careful. So many people forget a little thing when they do this final step. Try that last piece. And would you compare with the people that I paired you with and see if they got the same factor that you did? And I bet you some of you are going to be like, oh, I forgot that. I'm going to pause for a second while you try. So hopefully you didn't get foiled by the whole I thing. And there's one other little mistake people make. Forgetting the I is one of them. But then they put square root of 8. Why is it not okay to put the square root of 8? Because the square root of 8, tell me what's better than that, LG. It can be 2√2. So you shouldn't put a square root of 8 there. You should put a 2√2 there. Why do I have what? Oh, there's not an I there. Oh my gosh. You're right. I just totally spaced that one. I thought I had an x plus 8 there. So it's just the 2√2 is the only thing you could have probably messed up unless you're like me and put an I there by accident. 2√2 and minus a 2√2. There we go. Okay. Oh, I threw in an I because I thought there was a plus in the problem. So raise your hand if you had that as right. Okay, good. So then you're smarter than the teacher this time. Way to go. All right, so there's 3 answers. Does that match up with how many answers there's supposed to be? Yes, because it says to the third. All right, here's a really common answer and a common screw up. Kid comes down to this, and they give me 3 answers. Why shouldn't you give me 3 answers this time? Or there's no x right there. There should be an answer for this, which is what? -3. There's an answer for that. Can you do it in your head? Positive 2. If I put in a 2, it's not going to work. 3 halves. If you can't do it in your head, what you do is 2x minus 3 equals 0, and you solve it. You know what I mean? You're just trying to set it equal to 0, right? So then you just add 3 to both sides, and then you'll pretty quickly have 3/2 as your answer. Okay. So you've learned to divide and conquer. You should be able to handle the purple one. It's the scariest of them all. And especially because of how you start. I'll give you a hint. See if you can handle this. Is it blue on yours? And it's probably, it's just a purpley blue. Fine, whatever. Do that one. I'm going to pause while you give it a try. Okay, so your first step here. Did you notice there's a 4 in everything? If you didn't notice that, that's going to be a little painful. 4 comes out of everything. X to the third minus 2x squared plus 2x minus 4. Then you can start the problem. Get what I just did there? I took a 4 out of everything. Now, can you do it without taking the 4 out? Yes. You can actually do this without taking the 4 out, but you'll have to fake a 4 out at the very end then to make up for that. But it's easier if you catch it at the beginning because now all your numbers are smaller. Now I can factor just this part. And I will have still a 4. Don't forget to carry that down. And this becomes x, or wait, what comes out of that? Thank you. X squared minus, parentheses. So many parentheses running around. And then x minus 2. There we go. Whew. And then I'm going to go in green to this other part and say what comes out of both of those? 2 does. And that has a parentheses x minus 2. There. Oh. And then the 4 is still here. And then I have what comes out of both of these? X minus 2. And then I have what's left? X squared plus 2. I know these are tough. How many of you were able to get that far all by yourself? And that's about half of you. I understand. These are tough. We'll do one more for practice at the end. This one is not factored all the way yet because that part right there can be factored again. So 4 x minus 2 x and x. And who can do this fast? Just like boom. Yes. Yep. And why does the I need to be there this time and it didn't last time? Because there's a plus in there. We don't normally factor that kind, but now you're more advanced and you can handle that kind. You just have to throw in an I. The reason that works again, I could just take 10 minutes and multiply this all out, and you'd see that I ends up multiplying by I, and you get an I squared, and that becomes -1, and that cancels out this negative and makes it back to positive. That's why you need that I in there. Okay. So, final answer. X equals 2 is one of the answers. For this one, I'm having a hard time reading my writing. It's -I root 2. And this one, +I root 2. And I've got 3 answers. Does that match up with what I should have? Yes, says it to the third. All right. You just learned some heavy-duty math. Your assignment is to do the worksheet that goes with this and just do the even problems and even letters. I think you know how that goes by now. So if problem number 1 has an A, B, C, D, E, F, G, you don't get to skip all of problem number 1. You get to skip the even. Did I say do the evens or skip the evens? Do the even problems and even letters. So if it's got number 1's got a whole bunch of A, B, C, D, E's, you'd have to do the even letters like B, D, and F. All right. And that's all I've got for you for the video for today. Welcome back to Heavy Duty Math.